So, picking up from our last discussion on the characteristics of sensory order and the behaviorist critique, we hit a wall. We know these sensory qualities, red, blue, sweet, sour, they form this neat little club where describing one member often involves mentioning others. It's like trying to define red without using color or warmth. This creates a self-referential loop. Our big question is, how do we break this loop? How do we connect this internal world of feelings and perceptions to the external physical world out there? The trick isn't just explaining one sensation, but the whole system, the entire structure of relationships between them. We need to show that some known physical system can generate a similar relational structure. How do we actually do this? We propose building a bridge between the mental and the physical. Not a bridge made of words, but a structural bridge. We call this isomorphism. Think of it like creating a perfect blueprint copy. If you have two systems, say System A, physical, and System B, mental, they are isomorphic if every relationship within A mirrors exactly the corresponding relationship in B. It's not about the bricks being the same, but the way the bricks are arranged and connected. So, if a group of events does something specific in the physical system, the corresponding group of events should do the same thing in the mental system. This is our key tool to avoid that circular reasoning trap. Now, before we get too excited, let's be crystal clear about what we mean by isomorphism. Some folks, especially in the Gestalt school, used a similar term, but maybe a bit fuzzier. We're sticking to the hardcore mathematical definition here. It's all about the formal properties of the connections, the structure, not about looking alike. Imagine a 3D mesh like a fishing net. You can stretch it, twist it, crumple it. As long as you don't tear it or add knots, the fundamental connections stay the same. That stretched out net is still isomorphic to the original. When we talk about a model in the brain, we're talking about this topological structure, this pattern of connections, not some little picture painted inside your head. Got it? Good. Let's move on. This idea of non-spatial isomorphism has some cool consequences. In a purely relational system, think of it like a social network. Two different people could end up having identical sets of friends and connections, even though they're distinct individuals. Spatially, that's impossible. 2 points in space can occupy the exact same spot relative to everything else. But structurally, yes, this applies to groups too. Two different cliques within a larger social network might have the exact same pattern of connections to the rest of the network, making them structurally equivalent groups, even if the individuals within them are different. And crucially, what the elements themselves are made of, whether they're neurons, stars, or abstract concepts, doesn't matter for isomorphism. What matters is how they relate. A material structure can be isomorphic to an immaterial one, as long as the relational patterns match. Okay, so where does this play out in psychology? We actually have three main players here, three different orders or structures we need to consider. First, there's the physical order, the world out there, the stimuli hitting our senses. We know bits and pieces of this, but probably not perfectly. Second, there's the neuronal order, the actual wiring and firing patterns in our nervous system, the impulses traveling along fibers. This is part of the physical world, but tricky because we can't directly observe it. We have to infer it. Third, there's the mental or phenomenal order, the world of our sensations, feelings, thoughts. We know this intimately from the inside, but scientifically, it's hard to pin down the exact what, only the how we experience it, and we certainly don't know all the relationships. The crucial starting point is that the first and third orders, the physical world and our mental experience, are not isomorphic. They are different. If they were identical, we'd never realize it. So, if the physical world and our mental experience aren't the same, how do we connect them? Our hypothesis is that the link lies between the second and third orders, the neuronal order and the mental order. We propose that the structure of neural activity somehow mirrors the structure of our sensory experiences. Now, if the neuronal structure mirrors the mental structure and the physical structure doesn't mirror the mental structure, what does that tell us? It implies that the physical structure also cannot be strictly isomorphic to the neuronal structure. Makes sense, right? The neuron is part of the physical system. Also, remember, when we say isomorphic here, we mean structurally equivalent. It doesn't mean every single feature of a neuron maps perfectly to a feature of a sensation. We'll come back to this later, because ultimately, we think these two orders might be more than just similar. They might be identical. But for now, let's stick with isomorphism as our working tool. Now, let's tackle a common misunderstanding. Does this mean each specific nerve impulse always produces the exact same specific sensation? Like one particular spark in your retina always means seeing the number 7? Nope. That's the old constancy hypothesis, and it's wrong. Think about it. Does the meaning of a word depend only on the sound of the letters, or does it depend heavily on the context? Same deal with nerve impulses. An impulse's effect, its contribution to a sensation, likely depends on which neuron it came from, and crucially, which other impulses are firing around at the same time. It's the combination, the pattern that matters. The Gestalt folks hammered this home, calling it the constancy hypothesis, and showing experimentally that single stimuli don't lock onto single sensations in a fixed way. Related to that is the idea of a pure core sensation. Some thinkers, like Russell, suggested there's some basic, unchanging essence of redness or greenness that exists independently, and experience just adds layers or modifications to it. Think of it like a blank canvas getting painted over. Our theory flips this on its head. We argue that the entire edifice of sensory qualities is built from the ground up through interpretation based on experience. There's no need for a pre-existing pure sensation waiting to be decorated. Even the initial differentiation of colors, shapes, sounds, we believe that comes from learning, from the organism figuring out the world. This learning isn't just about what happens after birth. It includes the evolutionary history of the species too. So, in a way, we're leaning towards an empiricist view. Knowledge comes from experience. Let's dig a bit deeper into what we mean by these sensory qualities. We can look at them in two ways. There's the static aspect, imagining all possible colors, shapes, sounds existing together in our mind, like a vast library of possibilities. But then there's the dynamic aspect, which is probably more important for understanding differences. This is about the effects, how a particular quality interacts with others, how it changes our perception of a scene, how it leads to actions. Think about the difference between just knowing all the notes in music versus understanding how they combine to create harmony or dissonance. For us, the meaningful differences between, say, red and blue lie in their dynamic effects. How they feel, how they interact with other sensations, how they guide behavior. The static list isn't enough, it's the dynamic play that defines them. So, if we're defining qualities by their effects, what counts as an effect? Can we just stick to what behaviorists did and only look at observable actions, like pressing a lever or blinking an eye? Probably not. Modern psychology has shown that focusing only on the final action is like trying to understand a car engine by only watching the wheels turn. You miss the crucial stuff happening inside. The brain processes going on between the initial stimulus and the final response are essential. The central nervous system is like a sophisticated control panel, running complex internal computations that we can't see directly, but which are absolutely necessary for the observable outcome. Relying only on peripheral responses like muscle twitches won't cut it because there's no one-to-one mapping between stimuli and those responses anyway. The key is to broaden our definition of effect. Let's include everything that happens in the chain from the initial stimulus to the final observable response. Think of it like a relay race. The baton passer, stimulus, triggers the first runner neural event 1, who then triggers the second runner, neural event 2, and so on, until the final runner crosses the finish line, observable response. The effect of the initial stimulus isn't just the final crossing, it includes the activation of every single runner in the sequence. The difference between two stimuli, say, a loud noise and a soft whisper, might lie in which specific intermediate runners they activate, or in the timing of their activation. These intermediate steps are often hidden from direct observation in the brain, but we can reconstruct them by looking at the mental effects they produce and the occasional observable responses they trigger later on. This brings us to a fascinating point. How do non-mental events, like neural firings, somehow become mental events, like perceptions? It seems paradoxical. But the paradox dissolves if we accept our definition of mind as a particular order. Think about a single neuron firing. On its own, it's just an electrical signal. Its properties are purely physical. But when that neuron becomes part of a vast interconnected network, participating in specific patterns of activity, it acquires new properties. Its significance, its role in generating a perception of, say, red, emerges only from its position and connections within that larger neural order. It's like a single gear in a machine. Alone, it's just metal. But within the machine, its function, its contribution to the overall task, is defined by its place in the assembly. Let's make this concrete with examples. Think about flight. The same basic movement, moving through the air, can be achieved by a swarm of fireflies, a flock of birds, a bunch of toy balloons, or airplanes. Or consider machines. A bicycle, a cotton ginner, a calculator. They can all be built using wildly different materials: wood, metal, plastic, silicon. What makes them fundamentally the same type of machine, functionally, is the arrangement and interaction of their components according to a specific design. All other properties of the materials, their weight, color, origin, are largely irrelevant to understanding the machine's function. Similarly, the specific physical properties of individual neurons, their exact chemical composition, size, etc., might be irrelevant to the mental order they participate in. What matters is that they can interact in the precise way required by that neural structure to carry out its processing tasks. This leads to that old chestnut: the whole is more than the sum of its parts. Often dismissed as vague philosophy, but here it has real teeth. It means that arranging elements in a specific order creates something genuinely new and distinct. It's not just dumping all the parts into a pile. An order consists of elements plus the specific relationships between them. And the magic is that the same order, the same structure, can be built using totally different kinds of elements, as long as those elements can engage in the required interactions. Biology talks a lot about this, about emergent properties arising from organization, about the significance of structure versus the properties of individual molecules. Our problem fits perfectly into this framework. The mind, as a specific order of neural events, exhibits properties that aren't found in the individual events alone. So, let's bring it all home. We've established that we need to explain how our mental experiences arise. We've proposed that this happens via a neural system that performs a kind of classification. The fundamental question now becomes, how can we build such a classification system using the known building blocks of the nervous system: neurons, synapses, impulses? How can we arrange these elements to create a machine capable of sorting incoming information, distinguishing between different patterns, and responding appropriately, just like our brain does? Our task is to outline the principles of such a construction. We often talk about discrimination in psychology, telling apart different stimuli. But that word can be misleading, suggesting we're just passively recognizing differences that are already out there. We're interested in something more active, a process that creates the distinctions. Classification is a better term, though even that needs clarification. Let's define it technically. Imagine a simple sorting machine. Every time a ball of diameter 16 mm rolls in, it goes into bin A. Every time a ball of 17 mm rolls in, it goes into bin B. This is classification. The criterion for putting a ball in bin A is solely that it produces the effect of going into bin A. Different types of balls, based on their size, are sorted into different classes based on the effect they consistently produce. The shared effect defines the class. Think about simple machines. A ball sorting machine. Balls of different sizes go into different bins. The size itself isn't special. The machine's rule is: balls in bin A aren't objectively similar except for the machine's action. Another example, a telephone switchboard. Signals coming down cable 1 always ring bell X. Signals from cable 2 also ring bell X. So, signals from cable 1 and cable 2 belong to the same class, the class of signals that make bell X ring. Or consider a punch card sorter from old statistics. Cards with the same pattern of holes go into the same slot. Again, the class membership is defined by the effect produced by the machine, not by any inherent similarity among the cards beyond the pattern itself. Simple classification is fine, but our brain does way more complex stuff. We need multiple classification. First, an event can belong to multiple classes at once. Think of our ball machine again. Maybe a ball of a certain size turns on both a red light and a green light. That ball belongs to the red light class and the green light class simultaneously. Second, the class an event belongs to can change depending on its context. Imagine a signal that by itself makes a green light flash. But if that same signal arrives within a millisecond of another specific signal, it contributes to making a blue light flash instead. The event's classification depends on its companions. Finally, the machine can classify whole groups of events too. A sequence of impulses, or a set of impulses arriving together, can be treated as a single unit and assigned to a class based on the effect of that entire group. Let's flesh out those multiple classification ideas. Take our light showing machine. One ball might trigger both the red light and the green light. So, that ball is a member of the red light activating class and the green light activating class. Or think of the telephone switchboard again. Maybe a signal coming down line 1 can be routed to ring both bell A and bell B. That signal belongs to both classes. Now for the context-dependent one. Imagine a machine where a single impulse from sensor X usually turns on a green light. But if that impulse from sensor X arrives within 50 milliseconds of an impulse from sensor Y, the machine instead turns on a blue light. The same initial event impulse from X gets classified differently depending on its temporal neighborhood. It's contributing to a different response class based on the company it keeps. Okay, let's apply this classification idea to the nervous system. The input events are the recurring nerve impulses coming in from our senses via those afferent fibers. Initially, let's imagine these impulses are pretty much indistinguishable from each other, just a stream of signals, like a set of uninterpreted signs. Our job is to show how the central nervous system machinery takes this raw, unsorted input and organizes it. It imposes a structure, a classification, onto these impulses such that the resulting functional order resembles the order of our sensory qualities. We need to keep in mind the difference between the static anatomical structure, the actual physical layout of the nerves and cells, and the dynamic physiological process, the flow of impulses being classified. Here's the heart of the matter, our central thesis. We propose that this classification of sensory impulses, creating an order like our sensory qualities, happens through a system of connections. Think of it like a telephone exchange or a complex circuit board. Impulses travel from one fiber neuron to another. If, during development, connections are formed specifically between the fibers whose impulses tend to occur together, then this network of connections will naturally reflect the correlations present in the incoming sensory world. This connection structure becomes the basis for the classification. How do these connections form? The idea that simultaneous activity strengthens connections between neurons is pretty well established. Think Pavlov's dogs or Skinner's boxes. The exact mechanism, whether it's literally building new pathways or just tweaking existing ones with feedback loops, is still debated, but the principle holds. Now, where does this classification happen? It could be between the initial sensory neurons, or between those primary neurons and secondary neurons further in the brain, may be called correlation neurons. It gets a bit complex because an impulse might be classified directly, or it might act as a symbol that helps classify another impulse. But the core idea remains: classification happens via these neural connections. This is where our theory really diverges from most existing psychological theories. Most assume that sensory qualities are somehow pre-packaged, assigned to nerve impulses from the start. We say no. We argue that the qualities themselves aren't inherent in the impulses. Instead, the entire set of sensory qualities is determined by the system of connections the neurons have formed. It's the connections that create the qualities. The distinctive quality of a particular impulse or pattern of impulses arises solely from its position within that vast network of connections. And this connection system isn't fixed. It's built up gradually through learning and experience, both during evolution and during an individual's life, mirroring the relationships between stimuli in the environment. We can boil this down to a powerful statement. We do not first have sensations which are then preserved by memory, but rather it is as a result of physiological memory that physiological impulses become sensations. See the reversal? It's not sensation leading to memory. It's the memory-like connections, the learned associations, that transform raw neural signals into the rich tapestry of our conscious experience. The connections between the physical elements are the primary phenomena that create the mental phenomena. The physical structure gives rise to the mental world. All right, we've laid out the core idea. Now, let's start getting practical. To build this classification machine, we need the right materials. We need to quickly survey the essential facts about the nervous system, the neurons, the axons, the dendrites, how they connect. We won't get bogged down in every tiny detail. Our goal isn't necessarily perfect anatomical accuracy, but to see if a system built on these principles can, in principle, explain mental phenomena. We'll use simplifications to highlight the core mechanisms. So, what do we know about the building blocks? Pretty much everyone agrees the nervous system is made up of lots of specialized cells called neurons. Each neuron typically has a body, an axon which sends signals out, and dendrites which receive signals from others. There's been some recent debate challenging the strict neuron doctrine, suggesting maybe the nervous system is more contiguous fiber-wise, but for our purposes, we'll stick with the standard view. Even if the alternative turns out to be true, it wouldn't fundamentally change the conclusions we're drawing about how structure leads to function. So neurons are our basic units.